Enlightened behavior means perfectly superb behavior in words, deeds, and thoughts. It is a perfectly good behavior. Such a behavior is possible both intentionally and unintentionally. When one is really enlightened, perfectly enlightened, the perfect, superb behavior is unintentional. Because there is no idea of a self in an enlightened being. We normal beings believe in a permanent self. In fact, all religions except Buddhism refer to a permanent identity called a permanent self. In Buddhism, the basic teaching is that there is no self. Selflessness is the basis of Buddha's teaching. Self is the doer. According to our normal knowledge, as well as all religions other than Buddhism, there is a doer in us. In Buddhism, there is no such doer. Everything is a conditional response, result of a cause, not one cause, the outcome of a series of causes. And things happen according to the conditions that are there. Therefore, even an enlightened one called a Buddha cannot make another person enlightened without the required condition fulfilled within another person. In fact, the enlightenment of a person by the Buddha is not a thing that the Buddha is doing, but something that happens automatically, on conditions. Enlightenment means understanding. But metaphorically, understanding is referred to as the dawn of light. Even Buddha, referring to his enlightenment in his very first sermon, referred to his enlightenment as Aloko Udapadi. The light arose, Aloko. Udapadi means arose. The dawn of light. Metaphorically, it says there was darkness. Dawn of light means the disappearance of that darkness. Metaphorically, the darkness here means ignorance of the reality of things. Light means the dawn of the knowledge of the reality of things, both in and outside one person. With that realization, one realizes there is no item called self in us other than the concept of a self. It is the outcome of our own thoughts, our own thinking. We think under certain conditions that we are a separate individual, separate from the universe, separate from the nature, separate from all others. In fact, even scientifically, we are not separate from the universe. We are not separate from the nature. We are a product of the nature. We are a product of this universe. We are part and parcel of the universe. We are created by the universe. The universal energy called the universal activity. Energy is not a thing, but an activity. Universal energy is a universal activity. But an activity without an actor. There is no doer. But theistic religions identify this universal God as an omnipotent, all-powerful God, a creator God. In Hinduism, that God is referred to as Mahabrahma. In Judaism, it is referred to as Jehovah. In Christianity, it is referred to as the Almighty God. In Islam, that universal energy is referred to as Allah. But according to Buddhism, the universal energy is impersonal. Buddha referred to it as anattata, selfless. Once we realize not only ourselves, but the entire universe around us is selfless, has no permanent self, but a process of activities. Energy is not a thing, but an activity. A creative activity. Hinduism referred to three aspects of that activity. There is creation, the birth, identified as Mahabrahma. And there is sustenance, identified as the God Vishnu. And there is destruction, identified as Ishvara. This shows that everything and being in this universe is subject to birth, decay, and death. And nothing can retain a permanent identity because everything is changing every moment. There is only a process of changes in this entire universe. Buddha referred to it as dukkhata. Anityata means the dynamic energy, the creative energy. Dukkhata is the transformation of everything and being caused by that energy. Therefore, Buddha says, there is no permanent identity in anything or any being, except an ever-changing process. Once we realize this ultimate truth of ourselves and the nature around us, we become selfless and become a part and parcel of the nature that has created us, that is sustaining us, and ultimately that is destroying us one day. Once we realize this, we become attached to nothing. We give the full freedom to the natural process of events in and outside us, and we become perfectly relaxed. No tension, no friction, no liking, no disliking, and no ignorance of the things what we are faced with. In Buddha's word, liking is referred to as raga. Disliking is referred to as dosa. Ignorance of the reality behind everything and every being is referred to as moha. All our intentional activities are directed by this ignorance of the ultimate truth. That everything is dynamic, that is universal energy, everything is in a state of transformation, nothing has a permanent identity. With that realization, one's activities in words, deeds and thoughts become selfless. Therefore, that enlightened behavior is selfless, automatic behavior, selfless behavior. And such a behavior is free from all mental suffering, because there is no resentment and there is no attachment. And there is a pure mind, the original mind, which likes nothing, which dislikes nothing, and which does not ignore anything. That means accepting things as they are. Such a mind and a body behaves naturally, without any intention. Such behavior does not create an energy reproductive of a birth again. Therefore, enlightened beings are not born again. The aim of Buddhism is ending the life here itself without giving rise or rebirth. But the aim of all other religions is eternal prolonging of our life in an eternal heaven, along with an eternal God, Allah or Brahma. Buddhism is ready to face the nature, the natural law of nature. We are born here to decay and die. Growth is nothing but decay. Decay of what it is at any moment. A baby becomes a child, a change. The child becomes a boy or a girl, a change. The boy or girl becomes a youth, adolescent. Then a matured person, then an old person, then a sick person, then a dead body. This is the reality of the world in which we live. And once we realize this reality, we have no intention to do anything. Activities of all enlightened ones are unintentional. If an enlightened one called Buddha can act with an intention, with a motive, he can enlighten everybody. Buddha cannot enlighten another person with an intention. It has to happen. It happens when the other person is matured enough to be enlightened. That means a person cannot get enlightened by listening to the Buddha. So many people have listened to the Buddha. Even without listening to him, we can read the entire teaching of the Buddha, recorded by the enlightened disciple of the Buddha in the Buddhist canon called Tripitaka. All professors of Buddhism could be silent, could be enlightened if it is possible to get enlightened by understanding the Buddha's teaching through his words. It cannot happen. One can be enlightened only when one is mature enough to be enlightened. In the Buddha's time, children of 7 years got enlightened. When a gathering listens to the Buddha, some get enlightened, some do not get enlightened. For example, a person called Chundasukra lived adjoining for 20 years, adjoining Buddha's temple called Jetvanarama, on the other side of the fence, separating Jetvanarama from Chundasukra. Buddha could not enlighten him, he went to hell after death. In lay life, Devadatta was the brother-in-law of Buddha. Buddha couldn't enlighten him. No one can enlighten another person unless the other person gets enlightened by oneself. Therefore, enlightenment is a selfless incident. And all incidents after enlightenment are selfless. That means The entire behavior of an enlightened one is selfless. When there is no self, there is no intention. Unintentional and natural and spontaneous. But there can be an enlightened behavior by imitating an enlightened one. One can imitate a Buddha. One can imitate a Buddha's disciple. And that imitation, that behavior is intentional. Done according to the principle taught by the Buddha. But when one becomes really enlightened, all activities of one is selfless, spontaneous, natural, unintentional. Effortless because they are selfless. They have realized themselves as part and parcel of the nature. Therefore, enlightenment is naturalization, universalization. Yeah. A finite person, a limited being, becoming infinite, both in time and space, reaching infinity. Enlightened behavior is the behavior of that infinite nature, infinite space, infinite time, where the individuality get the so-called self get completely vanish, so that enlightened beings have no self to have any intention or to make any effort. They can accept things as they are. They can be content with things as they are. In Buddha's language, accepting things as they are is referred to as yatha labha santutti. It is the outcome of the realization of the reality, actual reality. Yatha bhuta jnana darsana. That is, seeing things as they are, accepting things as they are, becomes the nature of the enlightened one. And as I mentioned, thereafter, all their activities are selfless and effortless.